The passage that was just read to us a moment ago is at one time very inspiring, and at the same time it's very demeaning to some people. Sometimes common misfortune brings people together. At the time of a terrible hurricane, an earthquake, something devastating to a community, people who really were never good friends come together and they help each other and they work together. In the story that we just had read to us, this is from the 17th chapter of the book of Luke, there's an interesting background. The background was this, that the disease of leprosy was unfortunately somewhat prevalent in the ancient world. But it was not narrowed down the way it is to us today. It means a specific disease. To them, a skin disease would probably be called leprosy. And so there were certain tests that God gave to the Israelites about the skin disease. And these can be found in the book of Leviticus. But one of the things, if a person had leprosy or had a skin disease, many times these were very communicable. They, not necessarily leprosy as we know it, but different skin disease were communicable. And so a leper had to stay outside of the city. And various people who had leprosy or had skin disease, we should really say, they would congregate, but they couldn't go into the city. They couldn't visit their family. They couldn't visit their friends or anything like this at all. And if someone came close, tradition says even within 50 yards of them, they had to shout out and say, "I'm unclean, I'm unclean." So this was a warning. Excuse me. This was a warning to people that these lepers were out there and you really better stay clear. Unfortunate circumstances bring us together sometime. I remember Winston Churchill during World War II. He made a statement that was kind of interesting to me. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." And he said this particularly in reference to the fact that just prior to World War II, a great deal of animosity and a great deal of hostility was coming from the Russians. And it wasn't until Hitler attacked Russia that the United States and Britain really had friendly relationships with Russia. And so this is what Winston Churchill had to say when he said, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." I had an interesting thing happen in part of my own extended family. The daughter of my brother, my niece, they lived down in Homestead, Florida. And back in the year 1992, they had one of the most devastating hurricanes that ever hit the state of Florida, Hurricane Andrew. They almost lost their lives, as a matter of fact. They wondered, the whole roof was blown off of their house, and they had to cover themselves with a mattress, and they stuck themselves away in an old closet just to survive. Well, different insurance adjusters and so forth came down, as you can imagine, and one of the adjusters was looking at my brother's home, my niece's home, and they struck up a conversation, and they kind of became friends. And to make a long story short, later they married. I guess it really is bad to say a thing like this, but I'm sure that in the minds of those two people, I'm sure that my niece says to herself, "Thank God for Hurricane Andrew." Kind of gives you mixed feelings there. That kind of gives you mixed emotions about this whole thing. But the reason I'm saying that is that we have in this story, we have a very serious situation. A situation where people who had something terrible happen to them, they came together. Now, what is especially interesting about this is that when when this story was told, or when this incident took place, Jesus was in Galilee, but he was right on the borderline between Galilee and Samaria. Well, what difference does that make? Well, the Samaritans were hated by the Jews. It goes way back in the history of the Jews. At the time of what was called the Assyrian captivity that took place in 720 BC. I want you to keep that number in mind now, because it says something about how long animosities and jealousies and discrimination and so forth, how long they last sometime. 720 BC. Assyrian captivity. And the Assyrians took the Jews out of the northern kingdom, and they scattered them all over the world. And then they took other people that they had conquered and moved them into Samaria. Well, the people who were moved in there, they intermarried with what some people would call the riffraff. They were the unskilled people who were left there, who were not of any use to the Assyrians. The unskilled people, the uneducated people, the deprived people, the poor, and so forth. And now these new people would intermarry between them. So now you have a mongrel race. You've got a mixed breed here now. The Jews took a great deal of pride in the fact that they are the children of Abraham. We don't marry outside of the Jewish nation. But now these people, they're all mixed up here. Well, when the Jews went into Babylonian captivity, that was the year 587. Now, that's fairly close, roughly 150 years, something like that, between 587 and 720. The Jews went into exile, and when they came back, they had this Puritan idea about them. God has punished us. Now we are really the pure children of God. And the Samaritans, this mixed breed, they came in and they said, let us help you rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, because after all, we worship God too. And some of them did. And the Jews said, nothing doing. You're a mixed breed. You're a mongrel race. We don't want your help. And from this, by about the year 400 BC, there was such animosity between these two groups that they would have nothing to do with each other. Judea was on the south, then Samaria, and then Galilee. And Jesus went from Judea to Galilee a number of times. The Jews traveled from Judea to Galilee. Guess what the Jews did? When they left Jerusalem, they would cross over the Jordan River, go up on the other side, cross back. Why? They did not want to go through Samaria. Now, isn't that dumb? Isn't that dumb? Jesus, when he went from Judea to Galilee, right through Samaria. You know, it's an interesting thing that if Jesus had been like the people around him, he would have crossed over, and gone up on the other side. But there was an interesting thing that took place here that fits right into this lesson. And that is, he stopped at a well called Jacob's Well, and he was really thirsty. This was in Samaria, by the way, a little place called Sychar. He came in, sat down there at the well. A lady came in, and she was a Samaritan. And Jesus said, hello. Actually, he said that he would like to have some water. You're a Jew? Are you speaking to me? I'm a Samaritan. And then John puts in parentheses there, says the Jews have nothing to do with the Samaritans. And then Jesus talked to this Samaritan woman about worship. Do you know that this is the only place in the Bible where the statement occurs, God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. That's the only place it occurs. This is the longest statement that Jesus, or the longest passage that Jesus ever gave us to tell us something about worship from his own lips. Well, how does that figure into this? The only fellow who came back to express his appreciation, his gratitude for the healing, this leper. He was a Samaritan. He was a Samaritan. Well, all of this says something to us, friends, about our attitude toward other people. How do we look at people of a different color, people of a different race, people of a different ethnicity, people of a different nationality, people who have money and don't have money, people who have position and don't have position? How do we treat them? Jesus treated them all the same. There were the publicans that Jesus associated with. They were hated by the populace. There were Samaritans that Jesus associated with. They were hated by other people. Well, let's look at this miracle. You know, these men, there were 10 of them altogether, in this leprosy group, bunch. These men knew what their problem was. They knew what their problem was. They knew that they had a problem. Boy, do we have a problem. We are so sick. We are so polluted. We can't even go into town and see our family. We can't go see our children. They have to come out here if they do. We can't see our friends. We can't go shopping at any of the markets. We can't have anything to do with them. We know what our problem is. Our problem is leprosy. Well, what do you think they might have said when they saw Jesus? I don't know how they recognized him, but apparently they did. No medicine was available for them. No such thing as a cure. They understood what their situation was. Pretty easy to see that. They understood that they had to live in the dark. That is, the dark from the point of view of being outcasts. Can you imagine something? Now, I want you, the Bible doesn't say this, okay? I want you to use your imagination about this just a minute. Well, Jesus is coming by. Can you think of these desperate men when I'm saying, oh, man, there comes that preacher. He's trying to recruit a bunch of people to follow him. I don't need him. Desperate people need him. Weak people need him. People that can't make it, they need him. But not me. And all the time, he says to himself, and I have leprosy. No, they didn't say things like that, I don't expect. Instead, maybe some of them said something like this. Think of the wonderful things that this man has done for other people. Do you just suppose that he might do something for us? Or are we too far gone? They might have said, he's our only chance for healing. We need to be healed. We know we need to be healed. And he's our last chance. He's the only chance that we have. And then maybe I can just imagine one of them saying, boy, I'll tell you one thing. If he healed me, I will follow him to the end of the earth to let him know how deeply grateful I am for what he's done. What did they say? Simple statement. Jesus, Master. That word master is the Greek word kurios. It means Lord. Jesus, Lord. Jesus, Master. Have mercy on us. You remember the lesson that we brought a couple of weeks ago about, 1 week ago, about blind Bartimaeus? Blind Bartimaeus. Have mercy on me. Shut up. You remember the crowd told him, his friends rather, they told him that he doesn't have time for you. You're a blind beggar. Keep quiet. Stay in your place. No, Bartimaeus wouldn't stay in his place because he saw, here's my last chance. Here's my chance to see. And these lepers, they saw the same thing, and they shouted out and said, Jesus, Lord, have mercy on us. Well, Jesus said to them, go show yourselves to the priest. This is what they had to do when they had the skin disease of some sort. They went and showed themselves to the priest. And if the skin disease went away, they went and showed themselves to the priest. They don't have it anymore. And then they offered certain sacrifices at the close of that. Well, I want you to really get in your mind, they knew what their problems were. Now, let's move this over to something else. Let's take a spiritual look at this. Sin is an illness. It's an illness that needs to be cured. It's an illness of our spiritual being. We can't do anything to heal ourselves. Christ has to do that. Well, just stop and think about this for a moment. I'm not such a bad guy. I'm playing the part of an actor right now. I'm not such a bad guy. I don't really need healing. Oh yeah, I do a few things that are wrong now and then, and once in a while I really do something. But, I don't need him. No, people don't generally say that out loud, but we think that sometime. I don't really need him. I've got my business, I've got my friends, I've got my family, I've got my social contacts, I've got my recreation, I've got all these things. I just don't have time for him. I'm dying, though, inside. But I don't have time for him. Well, it's really tough sometimes for me to see myself the way God sees me. Paul said, while you were yet sinners, Christ died for you. My question has to be, personally, how do I ever show my gratitude for what Christ did for me? Well, it didn't do very much. Yeah, I know. A couple thousand years ago, he died on the cross. A lot of people died on crosses back in those days. I know that. Yeah, we celebrated, so forth. But we don't take him very seriously sometimes, do we? If he fits into my schedule, fine. If he doesn't fit into my schedule, tough. If it's convenient for me to do, good. If it's not convenient, too bad. Well, try that on your wife. Try that on your husband. No, don't. When we see the need, when we see ourselves, it's so important that we stop and think about the fact God sees us not the way we see ourselves, not the way public sees us, not the way we want to be. He sees us the way we are. And then there's something else that comes up. He sees us the way we can be. It's tough for me. I don't know about you, but it's tough for me to see myself as God sees me. Because like I say, I'm a pretty good guy. I really am. I'm a pretty good fella. You need to get to know me more. You would appreciate me more. Isn't that kind of the way we figure things sometimes? No, it's Master Jesus, have mercy on us. We've got leprosy. You are our last chance. Put that over here. We have sins. Christ, you are my last chance. Now, Christ says, I will cleanse you. I say, now what must I do? Now that I have become a Christian, is that all there is to it? You know, yeah, I was baptized, got my sins washed away, so forth. Now I just kind of, I may come, may not. I may serve, I may not. You know, there's a parable that Jesus gave us, the parable of the talents. And when the 5-talent man came and he had 10 talents, he'd gone out and worked and served and got the 10. The 2-talent man came back, now he has 4 talents. What did Jesus say to these people? The 5-talent man and the 2-talent man both received exactly the same statement. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, good and faithful servant. I have an idea if I said to the Lord, I'm a Christian now. What do you want me to do to show you how deeply grateful I am for what you did for me on the cross, something I could never do for myself? I just kind of have an idea. It might be say, be good, be faithful, be a servant. Because it's the parable of the talents. Well done, good and faithful servant. That's what he expected of them. I don't know of any way that I can express my gratitude to God more deeply, more meaningfully, than to learn to be a good person, a faithful person, and a servant of God and my fellow men. Well, I'm a pretty good guy. I don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. I'm a pretty good fellow. Hey, that's a bad definition of being good. I define what is good by saying what I don't do. Stop and think about that. Try that on your husband. Try that on your wife. No. Goodness is not just refraining. Goodness is doing. Goodness is producing. So when Jesus said, well done, good and faithful servant, he didn't say anything about, boy, you really worked hard, didn't you? No, he said you were a good person. You were a faithful person, and you served. And so I think, if we want to draw a contrast here, I think the contrast would be, I express my gratitude to God by being good, faithful servant. I fail in expressing my gratitude to God by being a negative person, by being faithful as it's convenient, and I'll serve when I want to. You see, Christianity is a life of service. And when these 10 lepers saw Christ, they said, he's our last chance. He's the only one who can do this for us. So, use your imagination again. They go off and show themselves to the priest, and then, boy, looky here, good. My leprosy's gone. It's gone. I'm healed. I can go back and talk to my friend. I can go back and be a part of my family. I can establish my business again. I can do this. I am a free man now. What'd they say? I don't know. Maybe some of them said, let's go celebrate. And then maybe some of them said, well, no, I don't want to celebrate with you guys. I'm going to go home to my friends and my family, and I'm going to celebrate with them. Well, there's all kind of things that they might have said. And then one of them, who was a Samaritan, he said, I'm going to go back and tell this fellow how grateful I am for what he'd done for me. And so this Samaritan goes back. What is the contrast here? Well, with the 9, they said, it's every man for himself. You do what you want to do, I do what I want to do, the other fellow does what he wants to do, and it's every man. I'm going to look out for number 1. That's what I'm going to do. Besides that, now I have an opportunity to get ahead, and I'm not going to waste any time with that. I want to live the good life. I want to eat, drink, and be merry. I want to enjoy life to the fullest now because I'm healed, I'm well. And one fellow says, I'm going to become a follower of that man. Why? Because he healed me. He healed me. Folks, if we could just learn as Christian people, if we could just learn the lessons of goodness, of fidelity, and of service, life would change. Churches would change. Families would change. But before that, I've got to open the door of my own heart. And I've got to take a look inside. And I probably am not going to like what I see. Because I'm going to have to see a man who is sinful. A man whose spiritual life is diseased. And I have to say to the Lord, Lord, you're my only hope. Now that you've cleansed me, I want to follow you wherever you go. Yes, I'm going to have to deny myself. I'm going to have to alter my lifestyle. I'm going to have to change my time schedule. I'm not just making room for you in these things. I'm putting you on the throne, and I'm making you the director and the king of my life. Why? Because you healed me. You gave my life back to me. How can I say that I'm grateful? I do that by being good, faithful, and service. Well, I don't want to think myself of myself as an ungrateful person. I don't think any of us really want to think of ourselves as ungrateful people. How do I show that I'm grateful? I show that by coming to Christ, coming to him on his terms, repenting of sins, being baptized into Christ, vowing before God I will live a good and faithful life and a life of humble service. If you're subject to the invitation of Christ today, we invite you to come. Let's stand together and sing, please.